John and Ken Show. John Cobell and Ken Champeau, KFI, AM 640. We're reading from a piece written by Joel Kotkin, appeared in many newspapers this weekend. The real legacy of Jerry Brown is the crumbling infrastructure. You're going to see this over and over repeatedly. Obviously, we had the Oroville Dam just 2 weeks ago. Then the report that the 14 worst bridges in America are all here in Southern California. And, they compare him, or Kotkin compares him to his father, who built modern California.
Yeah, and Kotkin writes, nothing so illustrates the gap between the two Browns than infrastructure spending. Oroville Dam's delayed maintenance, coupled with a lack of major new water storage facilities to serve a growing population, reflects a pattern of neglect. Just this year alone, the massive water losses at Oroville Dam and other storage overflows have almost certainly offset a significant portion of the hard-won drought savings achieved by our state cities.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
They were irritating us with their nanny state rules on showers, washing cars,
tearing out your lawn,
and they wasted a tremendous amount of money by having to dump so much water out of the Oroville Dam.
So it wouldn't collapse.
So yeah, and so much water is flushed out into the sea because they have not built the reservoirs, and they haven't been built in about 45 years.
He writes, you don't need to be a hardcore climate activist to see the need to expand our storage capacity. Because he also takes shots at Jerry Brown, but I want to point out this part first. Once a national and global leader in infrastructure, according to a new report last year by the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, California now spends the least percentage of its state budget on infrastructure of any state. Do you hear that?
That's why everything's crumbling around us. And he said basically, if you think that climate change is happening and it's going to lead to more rainfall, then why wouldn't you expand the water storage? If there's going to be more and more rain, let's expand the storage in order to catch that rain. And then we could use it during the drought periods.
And also to shore up places like the Oroville Dam so the spillways are ready. But his climate change obsession failed to spark any rush to modernize or expand water storage to capture the potentially increased rainfall. There has not been a major new dam or reservoir constructed since the first moonbeam era, in large part due to the environmental opposition and Sacramento's disinterest in basic state services. Don't we know that?
He also wrote about something I'd never heard of before. You know, everybody panics whenever we have a drought, and then they panic when we have heavy rains. But that is the natural climate for California. Years of droughts, followed by periodically torrential rains. Well, he says back in 1861, and 1861 would be before there were any automobiles driving around, before the industrial age, before any modern factories, right?
It's like Civil War days.
In 1861, do you know it rained in California for 54 days? 54 days, flooding much of the state, creating lakes in the Central Valley. And can you imagine if we had a 54-day rain today? What would be going on? Everybody would be screaming hysterically, oh, climate change, it's global warming. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's just part of the natural cycle. And every so often you have something unusual happen. And that's just the way the earth works.
And then Kotkin really zeroes in on everything here in the last few paragraphs. Nor is the water infrastructure alone in terms of neglect. California roads are among the worst maintained in the country. The Los Angeles area has the worst road conditions of all major metropolitan areas, followed closely by the Bay Area. But fixing roads, not a Brown priority, given that the state wants to put us on a road diet. Instead, we're faced with the mounting costs for a high-speed choo-choo that Brown wants to leave us as his legacy, but solves none of California's basic transportation problems.
Despite paying billions in gas taxes and other levies that are supposed to maintain roads, Californians will be required to pay new, more aggressive taxes if they want fewer potholes and sound bridges.
Brown's recent pronouncements suggest we will have ever more extreme climate policy, including virtual bans on all greenfield housing, regulations covering everything from new houses being built to cow farts. Sadly, this will all have no real effect on the global climate, given California's relatively small footprint. The shift of people, jobs, and productive industries to other less temperate states like Texas all but wipes out whatever might be gained from the state's increasingly extreme greenhouse gas limitations. Doesn't that say it?
We've been telling you this for 10 years. The California population is too tiny to have any effect on global weather or global temperatures. It's impossible. It has zero effect. And all you're doing is moving all this activity to other states, so there's no net gain at all, not even a tiny gain, nothing. It's all a waste of time.
He writes that the only legacy for salvation might be for a handful of tech oligarchs and the state's pensioners. The rest, devastation.
There's going to be ever more crowded roads, a perennial shortage of secure water supplies, cascading prices for everything from electricity to housing. Those realities, not the praise heaped on Brown from the media, will constitute the essence of his legacy.
Written by somebody who really knows the state inside and out, Joel Kotkin.
Yeah, you read him, you read Victor Davis Hanson, and you'll hear what's really going on, not the knob slobberers over at the LA Times.
We'll focus in on the roads when we come back because, believe it or not, by April, Democrats in Sacramento, when they have a supermajority, do want to pass taxes to, quote, fix the roads. And guess what's still around? That mileage tax. They're still talking about that, to charge you for every mile you drive your car. Coming up.
You might have to be ready to get into action. John and Ken Show, KFI. Deborah Marquez News.